Hello again. This is the third lesson of object-oriented programming and Drupal. And I decided to take a little step back and kind of bring it all together on a simple example. So let's create a class. And we'll call this class my class. And let's give this class a public property. Public variable. We'll call it A. And what we will try to do is we will try to print it out. Print my class A. And you see PHP Storm already tells me it's an error. Why? Because like we discussed in the second class, this class, classes are basically blueprints of a car. So what I'm trying here is I'm trying to say, let's get a value of a blueprint. This is absurd. We cannot do that. We need to instantiate it, create an instance of it. So in order to use it, I need to first create an instance. Instance 1 is new my class. This is how instance is created. And now I can get the value of A. Instance 1. Oh, now it works. I can get the value of A and say print it. And if we assign the value of A to be, say, 10, and we run it and print it, now it works. But only, so we are not interacting with the class, we are interacting with the instance of a class, instance that we created. Let's create a function, a method, and it will be a public method. It will be accessible from outside, like we just accessed this variable. Public function, and we will create a getter and a setter. Get A, and then we will create a setter. Public function set A, value of A. Okay. So we are getting A, so we will need to return this value. These classes are addressed from inside themselves through the variable this. So if I want to get this value, I need to do it like this. This A, and we will return it. Return this A. So if I want to access a variable which belongs to this class or access a method which belongs to this class, it's with this keyword, this variable. Then the setter, I need to set it. So we will provide the value of it, and we will assign this A equals value of A. Okay, now we can use it. Now we can in fact go and instance. You see that PHP Storm already suggests those functions because they're public, they are accessible. Set A, and we'll set it to 34. And then we can print it again. Let's see what happens. Boom, it prints 34. So here we set this value to 34, and then we print it. We print it directly. Now, we may not want to make this variable accessible from outside, because usually you use a getter and a setter if you want to standardize output and input. So you want to make it protected. And also we will remove that. Okay, so now you see it shows an error. It has a protected access, and I'm trying to use it like this. To access it from outside the class, I can no longer do that. So I only need to do a getter and a setter. Okay. So basically, this is how also Drupal classes work. They are classes. They have getters, setters. They also have properties like this, and they also have constructors. Sometimes you want to pass value to a class when it's instantiated like this. And this is called in programming constructor. Public function underscore underscore construct. So this underscore underscore functions in PHP, they are called magic functions. So we can assign this value of a here and pretty much copy this here, and look what happens now. We can provide this value 789. Okay, let's print a break after it so that we don't have everything on one line. Okay. So we will assign the initial value when we create a class. We'll print it, that value, and then we'll assign a value with a setter, and then we'll print it again. Let's see it. Alright, so here's our initial value that we assign during creation with constructor. We print it, then we assign it with setter, and then we print it again. Now let's talk about inheritance. Let's create a child class. Class my child, and it extends my class. Okay, and we will create my child class, instance of my child class here. So what do you think will change? Nothing will change, because right now my child, it extended the original class and didn't change anything. It's just like, you know, the same copy, basically. It works the same. So it has basically like taken this class, named it my child, and changed nothing. Now I can start make changes. For example, I can, so this thing, when it takes another class and extends it or inherits it, it's called inheritance in programming. Now it can also take and override one of those functions. Say I take this function, and instead of returning it, I will add 1000 to it. So what will happen? What will happen is this, is that this class will function exactly like this class, but this function that it changed, it will completely override this function. Okay, you see it added 1000 everywhere. Because this function, like, so basically if you create a child of a function, they are exactly a copy. But if you start overriding those functions, they, you know, this new class, that new instance, it will use its own function now, if it has it. If it doesn't have it, it will take the one from the old class. So yeah, this is how they work. This is how those functions work in Drupal. Now, one more thing is abstract class, the class that cannot be instantiated. You name a class abstract when you want to make sure that you will create children of it, but not this class itself, like plugin base. Plugin base is basically a class that has functionality and variables which belong to a usual plugin, but you don't. But you want to create other plugins from it, but not use it itself as a plugin. So you declare it as abstract, and you use its children. So it works, but if I now go and want to create an instance of this class, of abstract class. No, I'm sorry, wrong one. Here, my class. You see, it doesn't allow me. PHP Storm sees that it's an error. Cannot instantiate abstract class, my class, because it's abstract. It shouldn't be instantiated. Boom. Error. So why I love PHP Storm is that it detects all that. You know, if I were typing that in some kind of other editor, it would be dumb. It wouldn't see that. I could write lots of code and then have an error. And then, oh, what happened? Oh, I tried to instantiate an abstract class. It should be used as a blueprint for other classes, not instantiated itself. But here, it just tells me. It underlines it. Okay, so am I missing anything? Okay, I think that this is a good start. I think that this explains how the classes work, how they are created, how properties are defined, how functions are defined. Yeah. Also, one more thing probably is protected function. Do something. Is that, say, if I want to, in this function, if I want to do something like add those numbers, and that can be real anything, you know. Now I can access this do something from inside of these. Like, say, if it's a function which gets some password, we'll use time for password, hashtag of it, hashtag of time for password. That's crazy, but whatever. So we have this secret function which gets a password. We don't want to make it usable from outside. We don't want some, for some code in some other file, just get it, have access to it. So we can only get this from a public function getPassword. And say getPass. And say it gets a password of another keyword. And it checks if keyword is correct, and our keyword will be what will it be? 42, a very secret keyword. Then we will return this special password. Okay, return this, do something. Thank you for suggesting. Okay, so we will print this getPass. get pass, and it's 42. And like if we provide some wrong password, we don't see any password. If we provide the right password, we get our password. Now, what did it do? Now, we have accessed it from another function within this class. But if, say, I want to get that password in an incorrect way, like, what if I want to get, if it were public, get password, this do something, which returns password. If it were public, I could get this value without specifying password. I could just do boom and get it without specifying password. That's why it needs to be protected, so that I cannot access it anymore. Let's try do something. PHP Storm sees that it's protected. I cannot access it from here anymore. Yep. So that's why you need to use protected functions. So in fact, when you are creating a class, you need to think about what values will it store as its properties, variables. You need to think about which will be the internal functions, protected functions that process those properties. And then you need to think about which of the properties and variables this class will need to receive through getters or through the construct when it constructs initially, and which one will be accessible to the outside world through the getter function. So you need to do some planning and only provide access to functions and variables that class needs to expose, so that internal workings which happen inside cannot be influenced by outside code. Because you may think, well, this whole code base will be used just in our company, so it's nothing secure about it. I'm not working on some security. But still, there is maintainability. If you're doing something in your code and then you access it from outside, from some another file, from some another program, and then you change something inside your code, and that other function will break. So the less you expose, and if you only expose certain information in certain format, then you make sure that your code will function stable, and those other function and classes which interact with your classes will also function stably. Well, I hope that helps. I hope this explains this basic idea of classes. In the next lessons, we will return to look at Drupal, how Drupal implements that, and some other things that Drupal has that this simple example doesn't have.